For those of you who are new to our church, the month of July tends to have a kind of mission focus. Not every year, but many years, because the month of July is when we send a very large mission team to Bishop. And you're wondering, what is Bishop? Bishop is actually a well-known resort town on the other side of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and there's a highway that runs down that mountain, down the other side, which is called the Owens Valley. And there's a town there called Bishop, and next to that town is a Paiute Shoshone Native American reservation. And our church has been going out there, so this year has been the 7th year, and we take a very significant, we take a large team out of pretty much every ministry in our church, every congregation in our church. And this year it was it was probably more ambitious. It wasn't even just our church. This year it was an effort of 3 churches. It was our church and about 8 or 9 members from San Francisco First Presbyterian Church came, and then there was a church. It was about 5 members, including our children's ministry pastor, Pastor J.W. Lee, who serves a church in Gardena called the Jesus Love Church. I think that's the name of the church, right? Yeah, what a good name, all right? That's the name of the church, the Jesus Love Church. And so I thought, with all that going on, and our church tends to be focused on mission. Two Sundays ago, we had a really glorious worship service where 2 of our missionaries, we didn't plan it this way. I mean, we've never had it this way before. We only support 5 missionaries, and so like 40% of them decided to show up on one weekend. And so that happened to be the weekend we were sending our bishop team, and then we had a report from the Huangs who serve in Thailand, and we had a report from the Selamits who serve in Turkey. And that was I don't know about how you felt about that day. I think I came out of that service floating. I thought that was an unbelievable service. And I thought it would be a good way to kind of wrap up the month. Well, we're going to shift into a new series next week about biblical revelation and how important the place of Scripture is. But today I want to wrap up the month of July and our focus on mission. And I gave you a little appetizer from this passage 2 weeks ago, Acts chapter 1, verses 6 through 9. And let's really get into it today in 3 parts. Part 1, the gospel must go out and transform nations. That's part 1. The gospel must, not kinda, maybe, not optional. It must go out. That is its movement. The movement is to go out and reach nations. Part 2, Antioch Church in San Jose. What does that mean? All right, Antioch Church in San Jose. And then part 3, no small persons or nations. There are no small persons, nations, or cultures before God's eyes. And that's what He provides for with the gospel. So let's get into this part 1. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with this, this is the very beginning of the book of Acts. Acts picks up right after Jesus has been resurrected. So Jesus crucified. He's resurrected. He trains, and he spent some time teaching his disciples. And then right here at this portion, what happens is Jesus doesn't go back. He doesn't die again, because a person who's resurrected doesn't die anymore. So how does he go back to being with the Father? He ascends right there as a cloud. I mean, it's kind of, I know this is some of your things. Did that really happen? It happened. And so Jesus ascends. And this is what he says. He says that, so they ask him, so are you going to come back, restore Israel? Because at this time, Israel is under oppression. The Romans run the world, and they've conquered all these nations, including Israel. The Romans are pretty violent. They're an advanced people, but they can be very violent. They are a kind of grossly, very licentious people. It's not unlike kind of what so much of the secular folks today believe. You can worship any God you want. You can have any worship practice you want, as long as they agree with ours. That's basically the Roman view. And their view was very decadent. And essentially they believed in a kind of tolerance and freedom as long as it was always on their terms. That's basically what the Romans viewed. And so so for literally not just for 5 years or 20 years or 50 years, but for centuries, Israel has longed for liberation from the Romans, and they thought that Jesus was the Messiah, and the Messiah would politically, he'd restore Israel. That's what they thought. So if you're under a nation that oppresses you, that is something you might care about. I mean, we live here in America, and we've never really been taken over. We have been attacked. We have had our citizens killed on our own soil, but we've never really quite experienced anything like having a foreign power push us around and take away our rights, throw us in a prison, kill our people, rape our women, all these kinds of things, right? And this is quite normal under Roman rule. And so they ask this question, are you going to restore Israel now? And Jesus' answer before he ascends, this is the answer he gives before he's like, well, it's really none of your business. God has his own place. But then this is the thing he says, and this is what I want to really plant into your hearts and mind today. He says, you will be, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, and in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Now let me review what I taught 2 weeks ago. When I was in seminary, my professor, he said that most people understand that this is exactly how the gospel moved. Jesus was resurrected in Jerusalem, and the movement of the church started from Jerusalem, and it did. It went from Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And so what does that mean? So for those of you who aren't sure, so if this is Israel, Judea is the southern portion, and that's where Jerusalem is. And then the middle portion is called Samaria, and then the northern portion is Galilee. Galilee is essentially where all the hick people are from. Okay, this is sort of like the hillbilly land. All right, this area is mixed race. So Judea is really where all the sophisticated people and all the powerful people, all the educated people are. And that's really where the theology, that's where the Bible is taught the thickest. That's where people follow it the most carefully. And so that's Judea. And then there's Samaria, and Samaria is a mixed race people, because a couple hundred years before, a different nation had come in and conquered this area, and then they had intermarried with the people, and so they really weren't pure Jews. They had partly a kind of a biblical theology where they understood the history of what God has done, and through his covenants through Moses and David and etc. They partly understood that stuff, but then they had a whole bunch of other pagan practices, and so Samaria was a kind of a real interesting mixed bag. And for those of you who may not know, Samaria and Judea, people who are Jews who lived either up in Galilee or down in Judea, they did not like Samaritans. It was a straight up, it's as bad as any kind of racial problem that we have here in America, or even worse actually. Because if you were to go from Galilee down to Judea, you don't take the direct path straight through Samaria. It is said that people would go all the way around. That's how bad the racism was. And so Galileans or Judeans, if they're going to go see their hometown folks or something like this, they would avoid the whole thing. And so for Jesus to tell his disciples, what you're going to do is you're going to be my witnesses in Samaria, that is not a welcome message. Okay? That would be like telling somebody who's in the deep south, who grew up his whole life believing in the Ku Klux Klan, you're going to go right there into that black neighborhood, and you're going to go be my witnesses. That's kind of like what Jesus is saying. That's the message. You're going to go be my witnesses in Samaria. And then after that, then you're going to go be my witnesses to the ends of the earth. Now, understand something. People don't leave Judea. You live in Judea, maybe you go to Galilee, because you have relatives there. But very few people really go to different places. Even today, I don't know if you've ever been in towns or places where barely people have ever left their county, let alone left the state. So those of us who've been on the reservation, we've met young people or even older people who basically never left the Owens Valley. One of the young teenagers that we asked to come out to San Jose, one of the first things we told her is, because at that point we weren't sure whether we were going to drive them to San Jose or we're going to fly them to San Jose. And her name is Geneva, and she said, I think we might fly, we might take you up to Reno, and then you're going to fly into San Jose. And you know what her prayer request after that was? She said, I'm scared. Because she had never been on a plane. She badly wanted to come out to San Jose, but the idea of going to San Jose might as well be going to the moon. Never been on a plane, how about that? Huh? And so even today, that's not uncommon, but back then, the only people who were to go far away, I mean, you had to be a pirate, or you had to be a soldier, or you had to be some type of world trader, and that is an unbelievably small percentage of the population. The Roman Empire was in many ways the beginning of what we would call global capitalism, right? Because somebody has to rule the world and keep all the ships and trade routes safe for Greeks and Syrians and Jews and you name them, to be able to cross from nation to nation, and then to be able to learn new languages and then cross. The Greeks started this, and the Romans took this to a whole nother level. But even back then, Jesus is speaking to fishermen. Peter, he's a fisherman. He's from Galilee. Galilee, I told you, is hick. And this is probably the most traveling he's ever done. Jesus made him walk through Samaria. He probably didn't like it. During the ministry of Jesus' time, he says, we're going to go to Jerusalem. And then they're probably thinking, let's go this way. And then Jesus said, no, we're going to go this way. We're going to go the usual way the Jews go, which is to avoid Samaria. And he said, no, we're going to go right through the middle of Samaria. That was probably a crazy piece of culture shock for Peter. These are the kinds of people Jesus is speaking to. And he said, this is what you're going to do. And then in chapter 1 and 2, Peter, the apostle, starts to preach the gospel. And power from the Holy Spirit comes upon them. They start preaching the gospel. All kinds of people start getting saved. And for the most part, they're all Jews, because Jerusalem is pretty much a city of Jews. There are non-Jews. There are Gentiles who come because it's a major city. But most of them think that the stuff about Jesus is some kind of weird, it's a weird Jewish sect. It's only for Jews. It has something to do with this thing called the Bible. And it has some continuity with Moses and David and all these weird promises, and something about a Messiah. And so all the people who are coming to salvation are Jews. And actually, right after Peter preaches, thousands of people get saved. So actually, some people think a mega church is an American invention. Not true. It was right from the get-go. And it was an amazing church. Serving the poor. They raised up the first set of deacons. And people would come and bring their wealth and sacrifice their wealth so that the church can grow. So right from the get-go, it was a healthy church, because that's what happens in healthy churches. People are impacted by what God has done for them through Jesus. They're deeply grateful. They start to bring their time, their energy, their money. They start to serve those people who have less than them. They want to reach other people. And this church is growing, and there was deep love and fellowship in the church. Except there was one single problem. It wasn't leaving Jerusalem. That was the problem. The problem was, it was a great church, but it was just a church just for them. It was a church just for the people of Judea, but it's very, very explicit from the mouth of Jesus, that's not my will. So all these guys are sitting here, they're huddled into their normal culture. Our normal culture is we don't hang out with Samaritans. You can read this, if you read ancient Jewish literature, there's attitudes toward Gentiles like this. Thank you, Lord, that you did not, there are prayers by Pharisees that say things like this. Thank you, Lord, that you did not make me a woman or a Gentile or a dog. How do you like that? That's the Jewish attitude toward Gentiles. And that doesn't obviously tell you not too great about some of their attitude toward women. All right? And why? Because Gentiles were violent people, or they were incredibly sexually decadent people, or they were filled with lies, or they would have all kinds of crazy worship practices, and you could, it's not like a weird theory. You can go right to their temple, and if you would go to these various Gentile cities, you can go right to their temples, you can see them doing their weird sacrifices, and they can have their strange orgies, and they would practice and teach these things to their children and to their neighbors. And oftentimes you would deal with them. They didn't have the Ten Commandments, they didn't have all the laws, they didn't have all these things, and so there wasn't, from youth, children weren't raised to have a certain kind of integrity and of treating the poor a certain kind of way, because it's just normal in so many cultures. Like, we don't care about the poor, we hate the poor. I don't know if you understand that in so many cultures in the world, in fact, most cultures in the world, the poor are despised. And sexual decadence, when you take, we despise the poor and we have sex with whomever we want, and you put those things together, you know what happens? Things called sex trafficking starts to happen. Things like, because people are enslaved to their sexual appetites, and they don't care that these people are poor and they're weak, so now we can use them, we can trade them, we can kill them, we can sell them. This kind of stuff is normal. This kind of stuff is normal in the Gentile world. And so I'm not trying to just say these things to you because if I told you this prayer that some Pharisees said, that Jewish Pharisees say, you were like, oh my gosh, they're so superior, and they're so elitist, and they're so racist, and that is partly true. But when they looked at other people, they would say, wow, they're really gross, and they're evil. And that also is true. See it? This is the world without Christ. And so they're doing their normal thing, and by the way, all cultures, we all only like to hang out with ourselves. Now I'm going to make a little critique of, I think, what is kind of American secular culture. American secular culture thinks that if everybody is just tolerant toward everybody else, and then just agrees with us, because of course, we're the most advanced, tolerant people, do you notice that American secular culture will tolerate everybody's culture as long as it agrees with them? And then they just assume that if they go out and meet all these other people from other religions and other socioeconomic classes and other races and ethnicities and skin colors, that they'll just like them. But that's absolutely not true. If you actually go out and meet them, there'll be all kinds of things that they do that are deeply offensive, that are incredibly troubling, things that their foods, you can't stand their foods, you can't stand the way they use the bathroom or don't use the bathroom. Can't stand the way they clean or don't clean. And you certainly don't like their worship practices and their morality. And this is normal in the world. Every culture thinks that our culture is the most special culture. And we're the most comfortable in this culture. And we're the ones who have most, not everything right, but most of the things right. And everybody else, well, maybe they're okay. We can have a very sentimental idea that we will like them, but when you actually encounter them, it's really, really hard. And quite frankly, there are times we won't like them. And time again, when our team goes out onto the Native American reservation, we have people in our team. Most of us are Asian Americans. The majority of us are Korean Americans from San Jose. It's its own particular culture. There's a kind of Koreanness going on. There's an Asian aspect of it. There's a San Jose and kind of like city aspect of it. And then we go right into, and we're starting to get to know this Paiute culture, and we're supposed to love them and have compassion for them and reach them for Jesus, right? And after about 2 or 3 days, some of our members find out, I don't really like them. And it's one of the hardest things. I don't really like them. I can't stand this kid that I'm supposed to love in VBS, but really, he's a real little liar and a snot. I have to watch my wallet. And he has no respect. And he didn't shower before he came. And it's 102 degrees today, and he really smells. Now, our guys don't actually say this. They don't actually say this, but that's what they feel. I know that's what they feel. That's what cross-cultural ministry is like. Now, how did Jesus take these these Jewish Christians who are in their holy huddle in a beautiful church? And why wouldn't you want to be in a church? It's a beautiful church. People are loving each other. People are reaching the poor. People are sacrificing their wealth and their time. Don't you want to be in a church like that? I want to be in a church like that. Don't you want to stay in that huddle? But that's not what the Lord's will was. And how did Jesus get them to break up the holy huddle and start to do His will? I'm going to say something to you that you might not like. I'm going to say this to you because this is in the Bible and this is very explicit. Okay? We can either follow God's will and obey Him and go along with Him and be blessed by Him and be pleasing to Him. Or we can decide, well, Jesus, that part about going to Samaria, that's kind of like a bad idea. I don't really want to do that. And we asked for volunteers in our church. I can actually imagine they might have tried this. Volunteers to go to Samaria to share with them the gospel. 5,000 people in this church, like no takers. I could imagine it because this could happen. So you know how Jesus, if we can either obey Jesus and do church and receive His kingdom, His glory the way He calls, or we can just sit around and resist Him and just kind of make church our holy huddle, our comfortable little zone that we use it for ourselves. So like take church, and church, this is the American way of doing it. We make church into the little mall that we like. And because, a mall is comfortable. It's got AC, it's got little stores, it's got all the different little comfortable foods and things that we like. And lots of people, especially here in America, especially in prosperous cities like San Jose, that's the way we want our churches to be. We want it to be comfortable places. And I call this church-like mall. There's a tension in the human heart. We love God, but on the one hand, we're like, I don't want to do anything that's too hard. And if we decide we don't really want to follow God and we're just going to do kind of this comfortable thing that we want to do, nobody's ever created the most comfortable church except America. I mean, they would probably be shocked. But, so how did God do it? Well, He let persecution come, and one of their very best leaders, a guy named Stephen. So you get up to Acts chapter 7, one of their very best guys named Stephen, he gets stoned. And he dies. And then you know what happened after that? Now the people realize, oh my goodness, we're going to die. Some of us are going to die. You know what happened? The church scattered. And then in Acts chapter 8, so Acts chapter 7, Stephen is stoned and dies. Acts chapter 8, finally, one of the original apostles, Philip, goes to Samaria, and then in Samaria, then he preaches the gospel, and people start getting transformed, and they receive it, and they start getting changed. That happens. And then in Acts chapter 9, there's a guy, his name is Saul. So if you want to know who Saul is a person, he's a super pious Jewish Pharisee, and he hates Christianity. He hates this message about Jesus. And when Stephen was being stoned, Saul took the coats. I'll hold your coat while you throw rocks. That's how much Saul liked it. And Saul was going from church to church. So Saul became an instrument of God before he ever became a Christian by scattering the church, making Christians scared. And so he started tearing people out. He started imprisoning Christians. And so then the Christians spread. They started going to Samaria, and then they ultimately ended up going to a city called Antioch, which is far to the north. It's like way up there in the Syria area, right? So it's not even in Israel anymore. It's in a whole other nation, and it's a whole-on Gentile, okay? And in Acts chapter 9, Saul is miraculously converted, and then he becomes a guy that you might have heard of. His name is Paul. And later on, when the Christians who go to Antioch start sharing the gospel with Gentiles, not people who even know anything about the Bible. I mean, just straight, complete pagans, because that's what a Gentile is. A Gentile is a total pagan. They start sharing the gospel with these folks. They get saved, and the apostles realize God is doing something new. And then that church says, we must go out and reach other nations. And the leader that they commissioned to do that is a guy named Paul, who used to be Saul, who held the coats when Stephen was murdered. And that's how God took even something horrible and evil, and God made Acts chapter 1 start to happen. That's how it happened. So why am I telling you this scary story? This is the lesson that I want us to take away from this scary story. We can follow God's will, or God can break us, and then we'll follow His will a different way. We can follow His will. We can follow His will, and then He'll shower His glory on us, and His pleasure and His riches. That doesn't mean it won't be hard, but we will know deeply how great He is. Or we can try to turn His church into something that's comfortable for us, and then He'll still get His way. He'll just get His way a different way. And so I'm not trying to make it scary for you, but I want to say the gospel must go out. You understand? It must go out. There is no such thing as a church that's for us. Every church belongs to Jesus, and when Jesus says, this is my church, the church must go and reach people, because there are many, many lost children of God that Jesus will win. He will win. And if He has to break His existing churches to win these other people, He will. Now, with that scary thing said, let's go to the more happy part of my message. Part 2. Antioch Church in San Jose. I've been at this church for now more than 7 years. What do I believe San Jose New Hope Church to be? I don't think we're a Jerusalem church. Why? Because God had to break the Jerusalem church through literally by letting some of our people get killed. Right? The church that I long for us to be is the Antioch church. The church that sent off Paul and Barnabas. The church where people who didn't know anything about Jesus, people who are saying, wait a second, in Judea, those are the people that knew about Jesus. They had the Bible. Samaria, they kind of knew. And then, well, Antioch is a city they don't know anything about Jesus. I think right in our own church, we have all three. And that's the way it was in the Antioch church. In the Antioch church, they had the Jews who became Christians, and they had a deep sense of the Bible. They had the Samaritans. They probably had Samaritan Christians, and they kind of knew the Bible, but really didn't. Okay? And then they had people who knew nothing about the Bible. And I think right here, what is this church here in San Jose? It has always been my dream that when the Lord called me back to this church, that a church of, so what I think of like deep Korean American, I mean, this is a church that has a depth of theology. And the people who planted this church, they really knew their Bible. And then it's raised up a generation, and some people who aren't deep, biblically strong Korean American Christians. I think that the English ministry should be, I kind of see it as the Samaritan. Right? The founders who started this church, many of them are still alive, by the way, with the depth of biblical knowledge and faith, and have been faithful to uphold this church. I kind of see that as sort of Judea, and this is Samaria. All right, that room over there is Judea, this room here is Samaria. But actually, I don't want us to be Samaria. I want us to be Antioch. So who are some people starting to come into this church? They're not Koreans, and they don't know the Bible. They're the Gentiles. They really know nothing, but it doesn't matter, because the way you really know God, whether you have had generations and generations of biblical teaching, or whether you kind of sort of knew the Bible, and you sort of knew the Bible, but really you have all these pagan ideas, and then you kind of know the Bible, sort of like Samaritans do, or you knew nothing. There's only one pathway to Jesus. There's only one pathway through God. It is faith in Jesus Christ through the gospel. It's the same pathway. It's always the same pathway. And so it has always long been my church dream that, so when I first came to this church 7+ years ago, I preached more or less basically this same message, that we'll be an Antioch church in San Jose. And out of our midst, we will raise up our own set of Pauls and Barnabases and so forth to reach the nations. And 7 years later, let me say this to you. You may not see it. It's hard. I think sometimes it's hard to see. But I think today is the day for me to tell you it's happening. It's happening. Now, let's, in so many different ways, why does our church do the things that we do? Because we must obey Acts chapter 1, verse 8. When Jesus says, you will receive the Holy Spirit, and you will be my witnesses in Judea and in Samaria to the ends of the earth. I think, so this is an odd thing. San Jose is a wild and woolly city, and it's filled with the nations. You don't even have to go far away to reach the nations because they already came here. And right here in our church, I think it's like Judea and Samaria, and some of the nations start coming into this, right here into this room, and then we send people out. But this is what we do. Now there's a misconception that I want to first push back. When some people hear the term mission, they think mission is this idea, because in a lot of American churches, whether you're kind of like Caucasian evangelical church, and a lot of Korean American churches have this idea too. They think that church is this thing that's for us. It's for my people, it's for my culture, it's for my city, it's all the things that I'm comfortable with. In other words, church is something that I shop that's comfortable for me. Mission is something that's for them. And it's over there, it's far away. You go over there to the mission, we come here to do church. We go here to church, and it's for my people. But we go over there to mission, and that's a hard thing. Right? Let me tell you something about this. This is not from the Bible. This is not. I do not know where this idea came in America. Maybe because that, like, America got so good at reaching so many people that, as the culture started getting increasingly more Christianized, because even in a Christianized culture where Christianity is dominant in the culture, not everybody is a Christian. But as the culture became Christianized in America, I think people started thinking like, well, those people over there are pagan. So if there's going to be a mission, well, our country is Christian. But over there, they're pagan, so that will become mission. I think something like that is where this idea came from. But let me tell you, it didn't come from the Bible. And even then, I think, even if our country is Christianized, the fact that mission is something that happens over there and not here, that is completely biblically wrong. Let me tell you what mission is. It's God reaching people, period. That's what it is. God wants to reach His children. They don't even know they're His children yet. They're lost. They're running around. They're worshiping money. They're worshiping false gods. They're worshiping sex. They're worshiping status. They're worshiping security. They're worshiping anything except Jesus. And they don't know God, and they're His children. Mission is just to reach them. That's mission. And it will go, and it must go out. And when God reaches His children, His family, it is the most unbelievable kind of Christian, the unbelievable kind of human community. It's a new kind of human community. So let me tell you 2 quick stories, and I'll close my message. I've been telling you it's happening in this church. So, 1, how is it happening in this church? We've been supporting a missionary named the Huangs. And so for those of you who didn't come out to Tuesday night's dinner, right? So there was a wonderful dinner hosted by, it was at their house. The mission committee hosted it, but the Parks, Norma and Wesley Park, they hosted it at their house. And one of the missionaries that we supported was the Huangs. So quick story on the Huangs. J.J. Huang is Korean American. He's sort of like a Judean, right? Who grew up in America. And the Lord called the ministry. And then while he was in seminary, he met a young woman who's from Thailand. And her name is Junya. And Junya was raised up by American missionaries, but she is Thai. She's sort of like Samaria. You get it? She's sort of like part, who has this kind of like part Christian history witness. And they sent her, and they had a vision. They had a vision to send her to seminary so that she could be raised up to come back and reach her people. And she told me this story. So in our about the first year or so, Junya Huang was here in America. And she was staying in a hotel because not enough churches were supporting her, so she just had to get this hotel herself. And when I saw that she was in a hotel, I said, don't stay in the hotel. You shouldn't spend money on that. Why don't you come stay at our house? So she stayed at our house. Right? And she stayed at our house for several days, and we got to know Junya Huang. Oh, she's a soft-spoken lady about this yay tall, and she started sharing us her vision of how. So when she was younger, she served in a hospital where children who had AIDS were dying, and she would hold these children with AIDS, Thai children with AIDS. So for those of you who know, Bangkok is sort of like sex trafficking central. It's just like it's a city that one of the main businesses is prostitution. And it is normal in Thailand for poor people who live up in the hills and the mountains, not in the cities, to sell their children into this sex trade. It's normal. And so Junya's holding his baby, and she would say, Lord, how can this stop? And what she sensed that the Lord was telling her was like, you're going to call, and I want you to raise up a whole nother generation to reach this people. And when she mentioned this, at the time she started this ministry called the Jasper Kids Foundation, and there were only kids in this ministry. And she says, Pastor SooSang, in the future we're going to need to send them to college. And then I asked her all the same questions I asked her on Tuesday night. How much does college cost? How many kids you got? And you know what she shared on Tuesday night? So this is 6 years later. You know where they're at? They have 3 houses in Chiang Mai, which is the second largest city in Thailand. And now kids who started off Jasper Kids, so they go off to the mountains, the poorest people in Thailand, the kids who have like 1,001 shot of making it into college, the same villages where families will sell their children into the sex trade. And then she goes and does ministry, wins their parents to send their kids to Jasper Kids Foundation. Jasper Kids Foundation will raise up these kids, educate them, train them, share them with the gospel. And now now we have college. We have Jasper Kids College. And now we have to take them to the city, which is where the colleges are. So Jasper Kids College is out in the countryside. And Jasper Kids College now is going to be in Chiang Mai. And she says, this is where we're at now, Pastor SooSang. And I felt like on Tuesday night when I was listening to her, I said, this is sort of like the same conversation we had 6 months ago, except now the Lord has done amazing, amazing things. This is why we support them. Because of Acts chapter 1, verse 8. And I don't think it's going to be, it's pretty wild. The Pastor JJ is looking at a piece of land which costs more than $1 million. Because I don't know if you know this, but Chiang Mai is sort of like San Jose in Thailand. The real estate is skyrocketing. All the most talented people are driving toward the city. So just like, if you want to buy a house in Kansas, it costs, a lot less than San Jose. That's what's happening there. But the most talented people of the nation are driving toward Chiang Mai. And if you want to reach, you're going to reach them there. That's the next step that Pastor JJ wants to do. That's story number 1. Story number 2, why do we go out to Bishop? So again, 7 years ago, our church started going out to Bishop. And 6 years ago is when the English ministry, our congregation, was pulled into it. And what do we do out there? Our dream, you know what our dream is for the reservation? It's the same one that Junya Huang has for Thailand. It's the same one. We will go out there. We'll endure the heat. We will lay down our lives. We'll win trust. They'll give us their young people. And their young people will grow up. We'll help them get through college and send them back to their people so there could be a new Paiute kind of vision. A whole new nation. A whole new Paiute nation. And it's happening. It's amazing to me that we can go there with this sacrifice, this tremendous sacrifice once a year with like 70, 80, 100 people. And I sometimes envy Jonya Wong. She gets to do it for 52 weeks a year. We get to do it for just maybe a few weeks a year. We go one serious team for 1 week, and then we have we send smaller teams at other periods. And yet even this small offering unto the Lord's obedience of Acts chapter 1:8, the Lord makes it go forward. And there's a young generation of people that's coming to the Lord. And it's not even just one church. It's not just our church. This week when we were out in Bishop, there was San Jose New Hope Church. There was the Korean San Francisco First Presbyterian Church. There were members of the Gardena Church. And then there was the Valley Presbyterian Church, which is the church that's really hurting, but the one that we work with. And then there's another church, there's a Pentecostal church called the House of Mercy. And all 5 of those churches, they start lighting up this reservation. And it's amazing. It's an amazing thing. And let me say something to you. It's an amazing thing to live in the Bay Area. I think this is one of the most exciting places to live. Because the Bay Area is basically Chiang Mai for America. It's Chiang Mai for the world. It's incredibly expensive. And it's incredibly stressful to live in a city that stresses you out financially and all this other kind of stuff. But long after the mortgages are over and long after Apple is gone, sorry, Apple's one day going to be gone, all right? Because some other company's going to come along, a hungrier, more innovative, and smarter new company is going to come along with a better iPhone, and Apple will be gone, right? I know, because I've grown up here, and there are companies that were the hot companies when I was a kid, and they're gone, right? Long after all these things are gone, the brightness of Jesus will shine right into the nations. And I don't know what you want to do. What I want is, as long as I'm alive, as long as this is the church that I believe that God is calling me and Pastor Young, we want this to be the church that shines brightly. The Antioch church right here into the Bay Area. We don't even have to go far away. And that the reservation is a place that we get to call, that we get to transform, but there's a much bigger reservation. It's called San Jose. And there's all kinds of strange Gentile people here. And Jesus is going to win them. God will not be stopped. The one who will say, "Son, you are fully glorious. I want you to go be dirt poor and be born in a manger. I want you to smell their bad breath. I want you to poo out of your rear end. I want you to have the indignity of having body odor. I want you to walk with Gentiles and Samaritans and Jews and people who have all kinds of crazy, wicked practices. I want you to eat with prostitutes and touch lepers." And then, if that isn't bad enough, the Father said to the Son, "And then I'm going to kill you. Because I want them. They're my children. Every nation, they're my children. And we're going to form a whole new kind of community called our family." And Jesus' answer to that mission was yes. And if that is what the Holy Trinity will do to win the nations, you think he's going to be stopped because we're kind of scared or lazy or selfish? No. God is not going to be stopped. And what will he do if we obey? If God can't be stopped if we disobey, how can God be stopped? What will God do when we obey? What will we see of the goodness and glory and beauty of God when we follow him, as opposed to when we resist him? And so, I'm not trying to make any... I hope that any of you who have never been a bishop will start to feel like, what is going on out there? And it's hard. If you only look at it through like comfort lens, you're going to think it's like a weird place. But if you look at it through a spiritual lens, you will see Acts 1:8 is happening. And this is becoming an Antioch church. And I hope that's glorious to you and it's worthwhile to you. It's worth of your time, of your energy, of your money, of your talents, of your sacrifice, even your children. Even your children. You will sacrifice your children for the mission of the Antioch church. I've sacrificed my children and continue to do so. And like even if I try to pry my kids from Bishop, they fight me now. They fight me. Like I said, well, we're going to go on a vacation, but we might have to miss Bishop. All three of my kids had to go into a straight up rebellion. They were like, no! We're like, okay, fine by me. Let's go into 102-degree heat to love Paiutes for Jesus, because Jesus took on nails and the devil and death for us, right? Let's pray.